So we started talking about deduction. Yani we started talking about the mind, and we talked about the two functions of the mind. The primary function, which is the intuition. You know what that means. If you have any question, feel free, please. And then the advanced function, which is deduction. We said that وَمَا ثَبَتَ مِنْهُ بِالِاسْتِدْلَالِ فَهُوَ اكْتِسَابِي. Anything confirmed by the mind through deduction is earned or acquired knowledge. And we talked about proper inference. We gave examples. And we showed how the Sahaba used to practice deduction and how they found that in the Quran itself. The Quran is clear of all contradictions. The Quran is perfectly coherent and sound. But the Quran requires knowledge. It's not a document for any ignorant person to read in it and then interpret it. We talked about what premises and conclusions are. If you have any question about any of that, feel free, please. Now we want to talk about merging the mind and the religion. You know that the religion is not based on the mind. The intellect is not the foundation of the religion. The source of the religion is revelation. And revelation is news from God. But it happens that this revelation is not contrary to the sound mind. In fact, the sound mind will testify to the soundness of the revelation. But there are spots where the mind takes a back seat. And the mind taking a back seat here doesn't mean anything that contradicts the mind. Nothing in the religion contradicts the mind. But there are things in the religion that don't have anything to do with deduction or even intuition. So, for example, why do we have to make wudu before we pray? And why are the wudu organs the ones they are? And why are the wudu invalidators those that they are? So if Allah revealed it in a different way, it would be a different way. It used to be that it was obligatory to make wudu, or let's say, it used to be that a wudu invalidator was eating cooked food. A wudu invalidator was eating cooked food. So what does the mind have to do with this? The mind does not invalidate it. And the mind does not deem it impossible that cooked food is a wudu invalidator, that it is or it isn't, or that there are five prayers, six prayers, four prayers. The mind doesn't demand that it would be one way or another. All of that is by the revelation. So we want to talk today about merging the mind and the religion. Using the intellect without the revelation is like stepping into darkness with opened eyes. And using the revelation without using the mind is like stepping into light with closed eyes. So the mind then, what is its analogy? Its analogy is the eyes. And the revelation, its analogy is the light. So if using the intellect without the revelation is like stepping into darkness with opened eyes, which means you're not going to see anything. And using the revelation without using the mind is like stepping into light with closed eyes, which means still you're not going to see anything. Then the right way is to use the revelation while using your mind also. To use the revelation and your mind. Then you will step into the light with your eyes opened. I don't know who is the original sayer of that statement. Subhanallah. I learned this statement in USA years ago. Then I studied overseas. And in one of the lessons we took, the Sheikh was teaching us, gave us this. Also, he didn't attribute it to any particular speaker, though. And then it came on a test. And since I knew it already, then it was easy. And I wrote the answer. I wrote the right answer. And I was surprised that some of the students didn't get the answer to this question. So easy. How do you forget it? Using the intellect without the revelation is like stepping into darkness with open eyes. And using the revelation without using the mind is like stepping into light with closed eyes. How do you forget that? So that's just a lesson, though, that some people forget. Yani, it seems to me a very easy thing to remember. As you have seen, the companions used the religious documents in conjunction with the mind. We saw two examples. They knew that the religion only has what is approved by the intellect. Religious documentary evidence is called Naql, which is log or logging, or conveyance, or transmission, or copying. You might hear some of our teachers say, Fulan copied from Fulan. Imam Fulan copied from Imam Fulan. So they're talking about Naql. And for your information, Naql doesn't require a chain of narration. Not always, Yani. Like As-Suyuti said that Imam Ash-Shafi'i said that the anthropomorphist is a disbeliever. There's centuries between Suyuti and Ash-Shafi'i. Still, you can take As-Suyuti's logging of what Ash-Shafi'i said. It's not a condition that As-Suyuti says, I heard from Fulan, who heard from Fulan, who heard from Fulan, etc., all the way back to Ash-Shafi'i, which he could do, Yani, which is valid for him to do. But when he just simply says, Ash-Shafi'i said, then this is a naql. That's a logging, or a conveyance, or a transmission. So religious documentary evidence is called naql, which is logging, or conveyance, or transmission. Or it's called sama', or sam'i. Sama' itself means hearing. The actual attribute of hearing is called sama'. Sama'. So religious documentary evidence is called sama', hearing, because you need to hear it. Like, how do we know Allah has an attribute called istiwa? Not by our minds. Or an attribute called yad or ayn. It's by sama' we know that, not by aql. And you can also call it sam'i or sama', meaning what is heard. That's the documentary evidence. As opposed to what is deduced or inferred. It cannot be confused with intellect or reasoning. The naql and the sama' cannot be confused with, cannot be mixed with, should not be mixed with intellect or reasoning. How do we know there are angels? Not by intellect, by revelation. How we know the angels are not females? By revelation. Sheikh Abdul Razzaq read to us, rahimahullah, that the Sheikh said, rahimahullah ta'ala, السمع ما يبلغه الأنبياء والعقل إدراك النفس بواسطة العقل. The transmitted evidence, the sama', the transmitted evidence, the heard evidence, the documentary evidence refers to what is conveyed by the prophets. The mental evidence is what the self realizes by way of the intellect. The evidence that the religious proof would be either transmitted or mental, yani, we said here, there's two types of proofs. There's naql and aql. A lot of times they use those two words together. You know aql for mind. Naql, because their letters are close. Naql and aql. There's evidence from the Quran that the religious evidence is either naql or aql. Naql is the documentary evidence. Aql is the intellectual evidence. That proof is the ayah that we recited already, and now we're going to repeat it. That Allah says in the 10th ayah of Surah Al-Mulk, وَقَالُوا لَوْ كُنَّا نَسْمَعُ أَوْ نَعْقِلُ مَا كُنَّا فِي أَصْحَابِ السَّعِيرِ. The blasphemers will say in hellfire, had we listened, لَوْ كُنَّا نَسْمَعُ, had we listened. So what do we say is one type of evidence called sama, hearing. They will say, Lo kunna nasma, had only we heard. That means had only we listened. Had only we listened to the warning of the messengers as seekers of the truth. Aw naqil, or thought, yani, or had only we used our minds by contemplation and reflection. ما كنا في أصحاب السعير, then we would not have been among the inmates of the inferno. And Nasafi, the interpreter, said about this verse, therein, yani, in this ayah, is corroboration, yani, verification, proof, evidence, confirmation that accountability is centered around the transmitted and intellectual proof. على أدلة السمع والعقل على أدلة السمع والعقل. Accountability revolves around the heard proof and the intellectual proof. And also, don't forget here, we're calling this heard proof. Yani, that implies what? That you took it, that you learned it. Not that you just read it only. We didn't say there's a proof called read, read proof. Rather, they said it's called heard proof because maybe you can't read also. Prophet Muhammad himself was ummi, and the old Arabs were, for the most part, ummiyun, illiterates. But we know that illiteracy does not amount to lack of intelligence. It's just a skill that a person didn't learn. Well, he could be a genius, an illiterate genius. Didn't the Americans used to not teach their slaves how to read? Because they didn't want to feed their minds. Those wicked people. It was not because they couldn't read, though. Yeah, and it's not, what I mean is, it's not because they had mental problem. They could read. They could if they were taught, but they weren't taught that. It doesn't mean they were stupid. So therein, and Nasafi, the interpreter, says, is corroboration that accountability is centered around, and he revolves around the heard evidence and the intellectual proof. And that each of those types is imposing evidence. Each of them is imposing. Wahhabi doesn't accept mental evidence. If you gave him intellectual argument, he'd tell you, that's your intellectual argument. Give me an ayah from the Quran. Even though your intellectual argument will make pure sense. He can comprehend, really. If you gave him sound, rational argument, or a Christian, for example, if you gave him a sound, rational argument, he can comprehend what you are saying. It's not against his mind, but he will reject it because he doesn't value the mind. So it doesn't satisfy him that it makes sense. It doesn't satisfy him that what you're saying makes sense. He only wants you to cite an ayah from the Quran or a hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. If it's a Christian, he wants you only to recite a verse from his Bible. Therefore, belief in angels, revealed books, and prophets has to be heard and cannot be deduced, although these matters pertain to the basics of belief. Yani, not all the basics of belief are deducible. Some of the basics of belief are deducible, like the 13 attributes. If you just think about them, you would know them. You don't need a book. Like a person could be kafir with no contact with anyone, and he could know just from himself that God exists and he has power and has knowledge, even if he doesn't know the words to put to them, but he understands that in himself. So some things that are basic beliefs can be deduced, like those 13 attributes. And some things are basic beliefs and can't be deduced, but we need to learn them and believe in them, and we cannot go against them. Like that paradise and hell are everlasting. That's basic belief, and you can't deduce that. You have to get that from the revelation. These subjects cannot be reached by the mind alone, nor are they denied by the mind alone. Very important. They are not reached by the mind alone, nor are they denied by the mind alone. Don't forget, a denial is like a confirmation. What do denial and confirmation have in common? Anyone remember? What do denial and confirmation have in common? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Denial and confirmation have in common that both of them are judgments. Both of them are judgments. Yani, you're judging. If you want to think about it like that. Don't some people say you can't judge? Yes, you can. You're always going to judge. Good or bad. Yani, confirming or denying. Either way, it's a judgment. When someone tells you you can't judge, uh, he means just the bad attributes, the bad qualities. But if you were to judge someone as good, he wouldn't have a problem. Although it's judging. You said not contradicting. I'm not sure what you're saying. If someone says the Shahada, how do you judge? You judge him as a Muslim. So someone committed kufr. Someone might say you can't judge him. Yeah, he committed kufr. So you're going to judge him as a kafir. You might say, no, you can't judge him. Tell him if he says the Shahada, how are you going to judge him? So what's he going to say? He can't say, I'm not going to judge him. He's going to say, yeah, you are. You're going to judge him as a Muslim. Or why are you defending him right now? Because you're judging him as a Muslim. You are judging him as a Muslim right now. You're judging. It's a judgment. You're confirming. I'm denying. So these subjects cannot be reached by the mind alone, nor are they denied by the mind alone. When someone says about an issue, confirmed, you can say, what's your evidence? And when he says denied, also you can say, what's your evidence? Because both of them are judgments. Our minds alone are neutral pertaining to some issues. Our minds alone, we say the mind alone cannot, these subjects cannot be reached by the mind alone, nor are they denied by the mind alone. That means the mind is neutral concerning these things. Does hell exist or doesn't exist? Without revelation, we can't say yes or no. You shouldn't just say no. You shouldn't just say yes if you don't have any proof. So their judgment is that they are possible. Yani, the mind concerning them is neutral. The mind needs, the slave needs something to give weight to one way or over the other. And what is it that we have to give weight to one way over the other according to what we're talking about now? In accordance with our context now, it's going to be a prophet, a miracle wielding prophet. Imagine some people in a college, in a university setting, and then the professor says to them, he says to a person, do you believe that there is a heaven? He might say, yes. Or another one might say, no. And then he would say, why? And then each one would just say something. None of which is a proof. The one who said yes, whatever his reason was, yani, if he wasn't a Muslim, for example, he wouldn't actually have a proof for his yes. And the one who said no, he doesn't really have a proof for it. Or I'll give you another example. You know what some people might do if you take an IQ test, if you've ever taken one. There's many things. There's many different things they do in these IQ tests. One thing someone might do to you if you take an IQ test is they might show you uh, pictures of people. All these people look different. Some of them would have glasses on, some of them wouldn't. Some of them have frown, some of them have smile, some of them have wild hair, some of them have nice hair, etc. And then the person who's administering the test would say to you, which one of these is the evil one? So if you don't think very soundly, you're just going to say, oh, this one, he has a frown. That's not a proof. Which one is the good one? See, one has maybe glasses and nice smile. See, this one's a good one. But if you were to say to that one who is administering the test, I don't have any evidence, he might get annoyed with you. And then he might even say to you, well, just choose one. If it were me, I'd say, I can't. There's nothing for me. I have no proof. Why would I choose? That's how kafir is. That's the way they think. If he asks you a question, you say, I don't know. He might say, well, what do you think? If it were me, I'd tell him, I don't know. I just told you I don't know. I don't know. I'm not going to guess. It could be or it might not be. I don't have any evidence. However, once one hears that there were messengers, the mind judges that they need certain qualities. Yani, here, what's the mental judgment about prophets and messengers? Also, the mind is neutral about them, about their existence, about their existence. So if there were a person who never heard of prophets, and then you told him, there are prophets, he might say, why? Or prove it. But he shouldn't say, no, there aren't. It doesn't have any proof to say there aren't. The mind alone doesn't. Or let me give you another example. A person just grew up on an island all by himself, no influence from anyone. He didn't die. He survived and he grew up on that island alone. There's no animals there to hurt him. So he never heard of a prophet before. So would he think that there are prophets? He wouldn't have a reason to think that there are because he doesn't have any proof or reference. And if someone told him there are prophets, should he say, no, there aren't? Also, he should not say there aren't. So the mental judgment of the existence of prophets is that the mind is neutral about this alone. The mind alone is neutral about this. But when the evidence proves that there are humans called prophets, then from there, the mind will necessitate for them certain qualities, such as impeccability from blasphemy, major sins, and the like, and yani, truthfulness, and other things. So now we want to read these 8 steps. This is something that some of our brothers have worked on, and the sheikhs approved it, and we teach it, and it's very useful. So here are the 8 steps, or 8 points if you want. They usually call them, and you call athamania, the 8 points. It is true that the mind is not the reference for the sacred law. So that's settled by now, that's clear. But we can mentally argue for the truthfulness of such laws as the prohibition of wine and such beliefs as the existence of paradise and hell. That can be achieved in 8 steps, especially since an atheist would not believe that wine is unlawful. Yani, not to mention that he wouldn't believe in paradise or hell. Imagine an atheist said to you, prove to me that wine is forbidden. So this is most likely a disingenuous question. Disingenuous question. Because in the first place, he doesn't even believe that God exists. Why would he believe the wine is forbidden? And very likely that he understands this within himself. That he would say to you, prove to me that wine is forbidden, while he doesn't believe that there's any way you could do so. But the fact of the matter is, he's a troll. That's why he's requesting of you to do what he doesn't believe is achievable. As for us, the religion didn't teach us to do what is futile. You wouldn't say to a person to do something that you don't think he can do. Yeah, unless there's like a point. If you have a point. Prophet Ibrahim told the kafir, Allah brings the sun from the east. Bring it from the west. He knew he couldn't do it. But that was to refute him. To refute him. So that wasn't futile. So this can be achieved in 8 steps. 8 steps? That's a lot of steps. Yes. Especially since an atheist would not believe that wine is unlawful. Thus, there's no escape from establishing several premises. 8 steps here that should translate to you as premises. We need to establish premises so that we can come to our conclusion. Now, since we're talking about establishing several premises, this means that not every deduction is immediate one. Yani, what I mean to say is not every conclusion that you want to arrive at. Yani, there's something you want to get at. There's a reality you want to confirm. It doesn't mean that because this is a reality, you're able to confirm it in just 2 premises. Major premise, minor premise, and then your conclusion, and it's clear. It could be that you need several premises, and you need to go through several steps. You say to the person, okay, this is true, right? So he says, yes. And okay. So if that's true, then this is true. Then you would say, yes. And you tell him, okay. Now, since that's true, then this is true. You might say, no. Then you need to clarify for him. Yeah, because this and this and this and this. So he might say, yes. Say, okay. So then, therefore, it's like I told you, such and such. This is the conclusion. This is the right answer. This is true. Take several steps sometimes. It's important for you to be able to recognize something like that. Something that you can't explain immediately. You need several steps to get to it. And if you're good at this type of thing, then it's important for you to know how to streamline your thoughts, streamline your statements, and to know how to summarize so that you can get to your conclusions easier and faster. Step 1, agreeing to the channels of knowledge, yani the causes of knowledge. It has already been established that there are 3 ways for the creatures to achieve knowledge: sound senses, truthful information or accurate news, and sound intellect or reason or sound mind. Okay, we spent a lot of time talking about that. That should be clear. Step 2. So step 1 is clear. Agreeing to the channels of knowledge. Now, we said 8 steps here, right? You're going to learn these 8 steps. Doesn't mean you need to use all of them. You might be able to skip some of them. But if you need to start here, then start here. Tell them, well, let's establish some agreement first. Do you know that you can get knowledge by your sound mind? So you might say, no, I don't know it. Then you need to clarify. Then you're not going to go to step 2, step 3, step 4. He doesn't even know that he can use his mind to get knowledge. So then you need to clarify for him. Or you say to him, don't you know that you can get knowledge by sound senses? So if he says no, then you need to clarify for him. You need to stop here and clarify it. So, okay, let's say you clarify all of that. Or maybe you don't need to start here. Step 2, clarification that the world is created. What are we trying to prove here, by the way? Remember, we're trying to prove something from the religious law that doesn't have an immediate mental proof. Immediate mental proof is like saying, for example, this world exists, therefore God exists. And therefore God has power and God is alive. So this is simple, easy, you don't need many premises to come to the conclusion. But what are you going to say? This world exists, therefore wine is forbidden. No. Or what are you going to say? God exists, therefore wine is forbidden. No, also. So you need to set up your premises properly. To prove the validity of the divine laws or sacred laws, one must first prove the existence of God. Because we're saying that wine is forbidden because God said so. So if someone doesn't believe in God, then he can't make that argument. He'd need to prove that God exists. So if an atheist, you knew he's an atheist, and he told you, prove to me that wine is forbidden. If it were me, if he told me, prove to me that wine is forbidden, I'd say to him, you need to know God exists in the first place. I'm not even going to try to prove to you that wine is forbidden. You need to know God exists. If he says, I don't want to discuss whether God exists or not, then if it were me, I'd say, I don't want to discuss with you then if wine is forbidden or not. To prove the existence of God, one must prove that the world is created. How do you prove that the world is created? And we have argument for that prepared. The summary of this detailed argument is that the world is a conglomeration of volumes that are proven to be created because they are bound to created qualities. That means, okay, we want to prove the world is created. How we prove the world is created? Uh, you need to know what created means. Created means having a beginning. So how are you going to prove the world has a beginning? How are you going to prove the world is created? Because you're going to say, well, this world is made up of volumes, things that take up space. I have a cup here, I have a mouse here, a computer here, I have a pen here. Each one is taking up space. There's volumes. And these volumes have properties like they're still, or they're moving, or they're warm, or they're cold, or they're touching, or they're separate from each other. And these qualities come and go, like something's moving, but then it will stop moving and be still. And then it will stop being still and start moving. And then it will stop moving and be still. And then it will stop being still and start moving. So these are its qualities, its properties. This volume that's moving and being still and then moving and being still, this volume, this thing that takes up space, it has to have a beginning because its movement has a beginning and its stillness has a beginning. So someone might say, that doesn't prove that it has beginning. How do you know it has a beginning? Because its movement has a beginning and its stillness has a beginning. And don't forget, a lot of times you're arguing with a person who's stubborn anyway, doesn't really want to know. He just wants to be contrary to you. A lot of times, you need to recognize that. You're talking to a person whose goal is to contradict you, not to agree with you if you're right, but to disagree with you no matter what you say. So you say to him, because this volume cannot exist before both the motion and the stillness, can this volume, this cup, for example, it could be moving or it could be still. Can this cup exist before both motion and stillness? The answer is no. If he says yes, tell him demonstrate for me. He won't be able to. The answer is no. It can't exist before the motion and the stillness, both of them. Either when it comes into existence, it's moving, or when it comes into existence, it's still. And then after that, if it came into existence in motion, then it can stop moving. Or if it came into existence still, then it can go into motion. So it can't exist before both of them, before motion and stillness together. Therefore, then, since the cup can't exist before both the motion, which has a beginning, and the stillness, which has a beginning, then the cup has to have a beginning. And that's going to be the same judgment as the table and the house and the whole neighborhood and all of this universe. It has a beginning. If the volumes are created and the qualities are created, then the universe in total is created. Proving that the world is created may require debunking the idea of a beginningless chain. Well, I think we have something about beginningless chain coming, inshallah. Step 3, proving the existence of the creator. If one can successfully prove that the world is created, he can easily prove that it has a creator. His premise should be every doing has a doer. Uh, and I advise you to not go further than this statement. Many of our brothers and sisters, they have an argument they use. They say, doesn't every painter, if you saw a painting, you'd say there was a painter. If you saw a building, you'd say there was a builder, right? Maybe you heard some of our brothers and sisters, or maybe even some of our sheikhs using this argument. They say, therefore, if there's a creation, then there must have been a creator. Uh, there's a problem here. If you say, every painting needs a painter, what if the person said to you, can God create the painting without the painter? What you going to say? Then you're going to be stuck. And not just that. What if you said, every painting needs a painter, every building needs a builder, therefore every creation needs a creator? So what if the person said to you, every painting needs a painter, is the painter created? You'd say yes. And then he said, you said also every building needs a builder, is the builder created? And then you'd say yes. And then he'd say, okay. And then you said every creation therefore needs a creator, so is the creator created? So you're going to say no. He's going to say, you contradicting yourself here. So this is, I would advise you, don't argue like this. If you want, just say this statement: every doing has a doer. That's enough. Or if you want, you can say, anything that has a beginning couldn't have given itself that beginning. Anything that has a beginning couldn't have given itself that beginning. That's a very decisive argument. No atheist can get out of there. What's the atheist going to say to you if you said everything that has a beginning could not have given itself that beginning? I've seen this from more than one atheist. He'll say, then who created God? Which is very unsound, because your claim doesn't make room for him to pose this question. And then if you said to him, God is not created, he'll say, but you said everything has a beginning. That's because his mind is not sound and he's not listening well. So you'd have to say to him, I didn't say everything has a beginning. See how a person doesn't listen. You said everything that has a beginning couldn't have given itself a beginning. That's what you said. To an atheist, that means everything has a beginning. That's not even what you said. So if you want, just stick to this. Every doing has a doer. That means everything that has a beginning couldn't have made itself have that beginning. Step 4, proving God's uniqueness. If the opponent is not an atheist, skip to the 4th step. You have to prove that God exists if he doesn't deny it. Or else you're going to be talking and you don't need to. You're going to be saying extra stuff you don't need to. Then you're going to be like those salesmen. They want to sell you something and they beat around the bush telling you a whole long story. Just get to the point. Usually non-Muslims who confirm the existence of God make comparisons for God. So you need to prove God's uniqueness. He doesn't have any likeness. This is very summarized here. So if we wanted to, we could say, the way to do that is to say, but all that's not here. Step 5, proving the existence of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. To prove the validity of the religious law, one must prove the validity of prophethood. Before proving the validity of Muhammad's prophethood, one may need to prove his existence. Its evidence is successive mass narration. Tawatur report. So that means you need to know how to talk about Tawatur report. This is very important, really. This issue of Tawatur report is not a side case, it's a pivotal case. You need it to prove Muhammad's existence, and you need it to prove Muhammad's miracles. So that means you need to know how to talk about it. Step 6, proving that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam is God's messenger. The way to prove his prophethood is to prove that he did miracles. Their evidence is also successive mass narration. So, how are you going to prove to a person that Muhammad did miracles? By confirming successive mass narration. Same way you're going to, you're going to give him the examples of China. You say to him, have you been to China before? If he says yes, then you choose something else. Have you been to Hawaii before? Yeah. Oh, subhanAllah. Have you been to Polynesia before? Yeah. Oh, have you been to Chile? No. Okay. Do you know Chile exists though? Yeah. How do you know? You never went there. You never saw that. So what's he going to say? He might say, that's totally different. Uh, if he said that to me, that's totally different. I'd say to him, well, how do you know it exists? So then he might repeat himself. That's totally different. Why? Because if he did that, that means to me he doesn't want to be defeated. You claim it's totally different. Can you just answer my question for me, though? How do you know Chile exists? Tell me. So the way you know is by successive mass report. That's how. And that's how you know about kings of old and faraway lands. Successive mass narration. And Prophet Muhammad's miracles are reported in this way. So then if he says, well, I still don't know them, I'd say to him, but you can't deny them though. Just because you don't know them doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And he did do miracles. And if he said, well, how can I verify it? I tell him you need to research that. You're going to have to go on a mission. That means you're going to have to track those hadiths down and trace their chains of narration and compare them so that you can be sure that these things really happened on a massive scale. So here, you might not convince him. Maybe he doesn't want to believe in the miracle unless he sees it with his own eyes. So if I found him like that, then I would suffice with saying to him, you can't deny it. If you don't want to take my word, if you don't want to believe it, you can't deny it though. Because denying is like confirming. You need evidence. Do you have evidence that he did not do miracles? He doesn't have any. If you said miracles are impossible, then I would say they are normally impossible, but not mentally impossible. Then you need to know how to define things. What does normally impossible mean? What does mentally impossible mean? Step 7, proving Muhammad's truthfulness, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. The supernatural feat performed by someone who claims prophethood without possibly being opposed by something similar is as if Allah said, my slave is truthful in everything he conveyed from me, or else I would not have made this miracle happen for him. This is because whoever deems a liar truthful is a liar, and it is impossible that Allah would be a liar. It is not possible for a liar to perform a miracle, or else there would be no way to distinguish the honest one from the liar. It is possible, though, that a false prophet perform a supernatural feat that backfires. When we say it's not possible for a liar to perform a miracle, we're not saying it's not possible for a liar to do something supernatural. It is possible for a liar to do something supernatural. But if his lie is that he's a prophet, and then he does something supernatural, it will backfire on him. If his lie is that he's God and then he does supernatural feat, then his createdness defies him. His createdness belies him. In step 8, proving the truthfulness of the Quran. By proving that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is truthful in all that he conveyed, one proves that the Quran is truthful. And therein, and in the Quran is the confirmation of paradise and hell, as well as the prohibition of wine and other matters. And Allah gives thee success. Wa subhanallahi wa bihamdi. So we'll stop there. We'll save speculation for next week. Have some very interesting things coming, inshallah. If Allah enables us, I ask Allah to enable us. Any question? You said, what's the proof that a liar cannot perform a miracle? It's right here. It is not possible for a liar to perform a miracle, or else there would be no way to distinguish the honest one from the liar. That's the answer to your question right there. If a liar could perform a miracle, there would be no way to distinguish the honest one from a liar. So if you want to follow up your question, go ahead. He said, I have a feeling that a kafir wouldn't suffice with that. So okay, but what do you suspect his answer would be? Whether he likes the answer or not is another thing. But what's his response? What do you anticipate? Tell me. Sometimes when you talk to a person, I told you before, you have to just tell him the answer. Don't tell him something he wants to hear, just tell him the answer. If he accepts, he accepts. If he doesn't accept, he doesn't accept. So I'm not sure. Yeah, because this is a very strong answer, actually. That's why. He might not accept it, but really it's a very strong answer. And he won't have any good response for it. If it were a flimsy answer, he would be able to give some kind of response to it. The strongest thing he could say here is to say, well, there are no prophets at all then. It's not possible for a liar to perform a miracle, or else there would be no way to distinguish the honest one from the liar. Then either he's going to say, okay, there are no prophets then, or he might say, yes, that's right. There's no way to distinguish the honest one from the liar. A real prophet can do a miracle, and a false prophet can do a miracle too. And there's no way for you to distinguish the honest one from the liar. And then the answer would be, then we wouldn't have an obligation to follow a prophet, because we wouldn't be able to know if he is one or not. Is that clear? No. What you said about you have a feeling like Kafir wouldn't be satisfied with that answer. Yani, that could be the case. But that's why a lot of times, rely on the religion. You say an answer that's right, even if Kafir is not inclined to accept it. But you'll find a great satisfaction in the fact that he's perplexed, though, and he has no answer. Even though he doesn't want the answer you gave him, he doesn't know what to say. Any other question?